Formula One Focus. Time to chat to Hendrik Verwoerd about this past weekend's Grand Prix at Baku. Hendrik, welcome back. And I think probably the most exciting race of the entire season so far.
Absolutely, and I think it also nice to be with you again, Envia. But it's a point to just re-emphasize again. You know, a great race doesn't necessarily mean overtaking by the hundreds on every lap. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a great race. You can have a great race, a fantastic race, like we saw for 30 laps odd. There was a battle for the lead between at least two drivers, if not three, and possibly four towards the end. You know, for the victory, and only one overtaking in that whole period. That was when Piastri overtook Leclerc for the lead, and for 30 laps. I mean, you know, the 20 laps or so before that, Leclerc had the race in the bag, but Piastri was just more clever, and they had he had a bit of help, obviously, from his teammate, from Lando Norris, to keep Perez behind him. So in the end, it was a fantastic victory by Oscar Piastri, but a great race. Really, really, as far as I'm concerned, one of the nail-biting best races this season, and I hope we're going to see many more of it.
We're going to talk about this dilemma that McLaren is facing now, and not just McLaren, some of the other teams as well, with their drivers, how to approach it and the likes. But let's just talk about this race now, like you said. To me, Oscar Piastri is now setting himself apart from the others by the sheer audacity, almost, if I want to call it that, of his overtaking moves. You saw what he did to Lando at Monza. Now he did the same thing to Leclerc, and Leclerc tried many times after that overtake move to repeat it and do it to Oscar, and he just couldn't do it. Oscar, once you got past, you just defended well, and to me that's the sign of a mature driver. And I tell you what, I haven't seen such a calm driver in many years. I mean, that guy looks like he was out in a Sunday cruise, you know, driving along, looking at cows or something stupid.
Yeah. Despite that, he said afterwards that it was the most difficult race of his life. You know, and taking into account the kind of difficult or tight racing that these guys come through in karting and in junior categories, to say that certainly says something. I think absolutely two things that stood out for me, and it's not only me who sees this. I mean, everybody's sort of talking about it, but it really stood out for me is number one, his killer instinct. That overtake on Leclerc was I'm coming through regardless. You just did it, not close the door. And he came back from so far back that Leclerc was taken by surprise. He said so afterwards. He didn't expect that. That was, you know, the killer instinct that you expect from a potential world champion, and all world champions have that. I'm not saying he's the only one on the grid, obviously, that has that, but he showed, as far as I'm concerned, that he has that. And the other thing is what you refer to is the fact that he seems outward to be able to absorb all the pressure. Many other drivers would have succumbed to any of the overtaking moves that Leclerc tried to put on him. But he just kept it. He just soaked up the pressure, and he just kept his cool. Yes, he was helped a little bit by his teammate. No one should not, you know, forget the irony of that, because before the weekend, all the talk was, hey, how is Piastri going to be able to support Lando? This was before qualifying on Saturday. How is Oscar going to support Lando for the championship this season, for the rest of the season? And here in the race, what happened after the unfortunate situation for Lando in qualifying on Saturday, when he had to start he eventually started 15th. So eventually he was in a position to help Oscar when he was through the pit stop sequence, when he was ahead of Perez, and he could hold him up a little bit. And that little bit, that half a second or so that he could hold him up, assured that Piastri could come out ahead of him after the pit stops. So yes, Lando certainly played his role, but I think it showed showed that Oscar is the man to keep in mind for the World Championship in the future. I think, and we've spoken about this before, during the course of this season, we've seen Lando, you know, I think being a little bit too soft and too accommodating, and he tended to make some mistakes, and he tended to be very hard on himself. And yes, the team also made a number of mistakes and so on. But in the end, I think Oscar has the killer instinct that Lando seems to lack at the moment. Lando is very quick, and obviously he's ahead of his teammate in the points on merit, because he's been able to use every opportunity that he could use. But still, I think compare the two, and that is the dilemma that McLaren now has. What are they going to do for the rest of the season? How are their papaya rules going to work? What would have happened if the two of them qualified on the front row? How would they have played that? What will happen if, for instance, in the next race in Singapore, Oscar is ahead of Lando? I'm not necessarily talking about first on the road, but if he's ahead of him, is Oscar going to be told to let him through or not? How are they going to do this? Because Lando has also said he doesn't want to have the championship given to him on a plate. He wants to win it on merit, and he wants to feel that he deserves it. And I can sympathize with that. So it's a real dilemma. How do you deal with the situation? If the two are next to, or one ahead of the other one on the road during a race, that is going to be the difficult test for McLaren to do.
I think it's fairly clear that Lando will still get priority. He's still closer, what we say, 59 points behind Max now. He did make up a couple of points now rather than end up behind Max and then losing points. But the way that Oscar is gathering points is a bit quicker. And I mean, he's still an outside contender for the title. But I think they're going to stick to like you said, the papaya rules in terms of favouring Lando for the rest of the season. But if there was a term of that's more apt than the baby-faced assassin, I think that's Oscar down to a T, because he looks like your little, your best friend's, your
he's
son's
only
best friend.
21. I mean,
yeah, and this guy just knows how to win. Like you said, I think the big thing for me is the fact that the McLaren is competitive for every single track. Doesn't matter where they are. That car is simply the one to beat lately, and they've taken the lead in the Constructors' Championship as well. I'm not sure about Singapore, but I know that Red Bull does not like Singapore. We remember what happened last year with Sainz beating them, and Red Bull just couldn't get the car set up for the race. Just quickly looking forward to this coming weekend. What do you expect in terms of these two teams? Do you think McLaren will romp away with it now, or is Ferrari going to be stronger here?
No, I don't think so. I think we have now seen, and you know what, McLaren wasn't that competitive throughout the weekend. It was only really on Sunday. Well, maybe in qualifying, but they were not. I mean, nobody could touch Charles Leclerc in qualifying on that track. But I think that's a bit of an outlier because he seems to have some affinity for that circuit, that particular circuit. Exactly what we're going to see on this coming weekend. I think more of the same, but I do think Red Bull is struggling. And as Christian Horner said after the race, now they are going to have to chase. They can't defend anymore because they have now lost the lead in the Constructors' Championship. They may well be under more serious pressure in the Drivers' Championship after Singapore. But let's not forget that Sergio Perez is also pretty strong traditionally at Singapore. But Max Verstappen seems to have lost something. I don't know what. We remember back just a few races in Hungary when he battled with a car and he was frustrated on the radio and he was absolutely livid. He was emotional. Just a few races later, he's still struggling with that car. In fact, he was outdriven and outraced by his teammate, by Perez this weekend in Baku. And he seems to be very even-keeled about the whole situation. He doesn't seem to be too upset about the situation. He says that they've improved the car. He says the car is better now. It's not a monster anymore. But it didn't show. I'm sorry, but it didn't show. I saw a quote, excuse me, I didn't see him or didn't hear him say it myself, but I saw a quote where he said that in Baku, the car was on 3 wheels through most of the corners. So, clearly there's something is not working on that car. They are working on improving. And I also saw a quote from Christian Horner saying that, the trouble for Red Bull started in Spain last year when they brought the new floor. And from that race onwards, things didn't work for Perez. Max could drive, Max could drive around the problem. Perez couldn't, and that's why he had the slump. And then they brought some improvements, and at some point earlier this season, it worked for Perez, and then they continued to try and change the car, and it didn't work for him again. And now they're bringing more changes. I think it still reflects the situation that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago. That is that Red Bull has reached the ceiling of development of that car. They're tinkering on it. They're tinkering with it at the moment, and I think they're making it worse in the process. So I think that's the situation with Red Bull. They have the same or a similar kind of dilemma also with their two drivers. You know, what are they going to do? Max has got to be the number one. He's still leading the drivers' championship. He is still the reigning champion. I cannot see in any way that they're going to allow Perez to beat Verstappen in any race, if it is possible. I think they're going to tell him just to fall back, even if he's leading Verstappen, because Verstappen needs to defend that championship. But it is a dilemma for the team. If Perez has now turned a corner, which I'm not convinced he has, I think, you know, Baku and Singapore are probably two tracks that he was expected to do well. We remember all the speculation before the summer break about his position, and Christian Horner said afterwards, we decided to keep him on because we are expecting him to do well in Baku and in Singapore, two tracks where he's traditionally quite strong. What's going to happen after that when they get to the Americas? Is Perez going to continue being stronger than he has been for the last few races? We don't know. So that's a dilemma for Red Bull as well. I think we're going to see a strong performance this weekend by McLaren again. I think we're going to see a strong performance by Ferrari because they tend to do well at Singapore too. I don't know what we can expect from Mercedes, because I don't think that they know exactly what to expect from their own car either.
No.
So you know, hopefully we're going to see another. I can't remember how many laps we see in Singapore, but a full race distance battle at the front. I just hope we're going to see that.
The interesting thing about Perez, he's sort of crowing now to say, "Oh, I told you, there's something wrong with the car," and now Max is now being caught out by the car as well. And it's food for thought now. It makes you pause and think how much of this was actually a car problem, how much of it was a Perez problem, and maybe Red Bull knew it.
I think I've also been consistent saying that, you know, Max is not the true reflection of that car. The car is actually where Perez has it. That is what the car is truly capable of. But Max is able to get more out of the car. And I think that's exactly the case. I mean, that car is Perez is a very, very good racing driver, a proven race winner, a contender for the world championship at various points in his career. You know, you don't just unlearn how to drive and to race a Formula One car. But that car in the hands of Perez is where any other driver would probably put it as well. And Verstappen is just so good. He can transcend that level of performance from that car. And you know, I think what Perez is saying is probably true, is that Max is now experiencing all the troubles that he's always experienced with that car. That's how bad it is. So yeah.
But the funny thing is, now you just mentioned that they've been trying to tinker with the car, and this weekend was Max's worst weekend for a while. So it means they must be going in the wrong direction if he's not actually being exposed to this, to the level that he is. If you like you mentioned, he could drive around the problems, but now he can't anymore.
Yeah, and of course they've got another problem, and that is that they and I've just seen it before we went on air, that Christian Horner has mentioned it to a German publication, and that is that they have a problem with spares after that crash.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's only a week after, and that car is completely written off between the crash between Perez and Sainz 2 laps from the end. And they have a problem. He says that they will have to work all 5 days this week throughout, 24 hours a day, to produce enough spares and get it to Singapore for the race this weekend. So that is, I think, another troubling thing for them to keep in mind.
Well, another team that's got a bit of a driver problem, but it's actually a nice problem to have, and they've had a very unpleasant problem a couple of weeks ago, was Williams, that eventually decided to boot Logan Sargent, replaced him with Franco Colapinto. And that guy's been shooting the lights out. I mean, what a nice problem to have. The problem is that he's only contracted for the rest of the year. And what's going to happen to him next year?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the fact that he could score points the second time that he sits in the car, and he was, what was he? Was he 11th, I think, at Monza, just outside the points. So. He could do things with that car that Logan Sargent could never do. He could outqualify Alex Albon. He could outrace him. And he only just finished behind him, both of them in the points. One has to say, of course, that everybody that finished behind Leclerc benefited from the crash. at the end of the race, because those two cars took themselves out, and so therefore everybody else moved up 2 places. But still, Colapinto has been very impressive, and his team has been very impressed with his abilities. And James Vowles has gone so far to say, and I saw this only today, that obviously they cannot give him a seat next year because they've already signed Carlos Sainz. So he's now willing to start talking to Audi to try and get Colapinto into Audi for next year, because he says what you have to do is, if you have a good racing driver, you've got to let him race. There's no point in not letting him race. So James Vowles, says, I'm as proud as a father about what Colapinto could achieve so far, and I want to make sure that he is on the Formula One grid next year, which I think is admirable. So that's a bit of a dilemma. So they want him to race. They cannot give him a spot in their own team. He is still member of the academy, the Williams Academy. But Vowles is quite willing to talk to other teams. The only other team that seems to be open with a possibility is Audi, or Sauber as they are at the moment, next to Nico Hulkenberg next year. And that seems to be a pretty good solution, I think, to the problem. Poor old Valtteri Bottas, he's going to lose out. All the other people, Joe is going to lose out as well. We know that, I think, already. But the other juniors that they are talking about, Bartoletto is the one. Gabriel Bartoletto, he's a McLaren junior. He's currently the leader in the Formula 2 championship, so he looks like a possibility. There's another possibility, Isaac Hadjar, who's a Red Bull junior, who's currently second in the Formula 2 championship. So those 3 juniors are seemingly the guys in the picture, if one does not take into account that Valtteri Bottas feels very sure that he's going to drive next year.
Yeah. Well, talking about juniors,
it is a dilemma, I think, for both Williams and, in fact, for Sauber as well. Who are they going to put in the second seat?
talking about juniors, you still got Felipe Dragovic there. That's the reserve driver for Aston Martin. He was a champion at Formula 2 a couple of years ago, and I think he made a wrong decision to join Aston Martin because there's nowhere for him to go. And I want to talk to you about that situation quickly.
Well, I mean, he's he should stay there, because who knows how long Mr. Stroll is going to continue trying to make his son a world champion, and there might be a second seat open next to Fernando Alonso pretty soon, maybe a little bit of a longer term. And you want to be in Aston Martin because you've got Adrian Newey that's going to design the 2026 car. So from there on, you want to be in an Aston Martin, believe me. So I think he's just going to stay exactly where he is at the moment, young Drugovic.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it, because you brought it up, not me. And Lawrence Stroll is now spending millions and billions, I think, almost, building new facilities and building new wind tunnels and getting Adrian Newey on board, making him a shareholder, getting people from Ferrari. Cardillo is there. He's got Andy Cowell there to become the new CEO. He's got Dan Fallows there still. He's got an impressive team built up, but he still keeps his son in that second seat. Now, he's a good driver, like you just mentioned, of several of the other guys, but he's not, I don't think, world championship material. How long do you think it's going to take for Lawrence Stroll to realize, in my opinion, to realize that if he really wants to, fulfill his ambitions, he might have to think about getting someone else into Lawrence Stroll's seat?
I'm not a father. Let me immediately say that. So I cannot say how a father would feel about his son, that he has given all opportunities that he could, and who has proven that he actually deserves a place in Formula One. I think the old argument that he's a paid driver, his daddy's boy, and that's the only reason why he's there. No, he's been pretty good and he's been pretty competitive compared to Fernando Alonso on occasion. Let's not forget that he has started from pole position in his life. Yes, it wasn't in damp conditions, and he's also finished on the podium in his life. Yes, that's because of other reasons, but the fact is that he was there to take the opportunity. So Lance Stroll, I think, deserves to be in Formula One. There's no question. Is he a potential world champion? I don't think there's anybody but Stroll Senior in the paddock that believes that. So I think the crunch is going to come when you have a situation that, say, at the end of 2026, when Fernando's contract runs out, and the car seems to be competitive thanks to Adrian Newey for the 2027 season, and Fernando decides to bow out because he's now getting old and doesn't feel like traveling anymore. What are they going to do? Are they going to keep Lance in there and give him the #1 position in the team that could win the World Championship? Is he going to be the kind of driver who can handle the pressure of challenging and maintaining a full campaign for the title for a full season of what's going to be 24 races in 2027? Does he have the temperament of an Alonso, of an Oscar Piastri, of any number of other potential world champions, Leclerc, Sainz, anybody who's potential world championship material? Compare them to Lance Stroll. In that regard, I don't think so. So I think what should happen, speaking objectively from somebody who's not a father of a son who is in Formula One, that he has to say, Lawrence Senior, Lawrence will have to tell himself, look, we haven't got Fernando anymore. We've got a car that can win the World Championship. Lance will not be able to do it. Let us rather put at least one and hopefully 2 young, strong potential world champions in a world championship, potentially world championship winning car in 2027. That's what I think they should do. I don't think Lawrence is listening to us. I don't think even if he does, he would take my advice in any way, but I think that's what should happen.
It's just a bit of a blanket approach to me. You spend all this money and you've got these partnerships that just announced with Honda and formally announced that Honda is going to be the engine supplier. Like I said, all the money on the factory, getting all the best people and building up this entire team to be successful. And you've got this one glaring weak point almost. I know, it's, like you said, he's not a bad driver at all, but it's not necessarily the #1 driver in the league of a Sainz or a Norris or a Hamilton or Leclerc for that matter.
Or a Russell or any of those guys. No, absolutely not. Again, I don't know how a father feels about his son in a situation, but you've got to separate the two. I think
it's going to get to a point where some other shareholders, like Adrian Newey, maybe, for example, are going to say, listen, but you need to start thinking about this. But before we run out of time, I want to talk to you about is the changing of the guard. You mentioned Valtteri Bottas might be finishing his career. Magnussen is finishing his career. You've now got another possible Ricardo is going to be on the way out. That looks like almost a certainty now. You just read something else about that as well.
Yeah, well, what has been doing the rounds is that by this weekend in Singapore, the Red Bull organization is probably going to announce the lineup at RB next year, next to Yuki Tsunoda, who's going to fill that second seat. It seems to the indications are very strong that it's going to be Liam Lawson next year, and that Daniel Ricciardo is going to lose his seat there, which will probably be the end of his career. Daniel is probably not going to be fired. I cannot see him being fired before the end of the season. He's not going to lose his seat. There's no reason for that. There's no justification for that, really. But there's a very strong justification for him to make space for somebody like Liam, who has been promised a racing seat next year, not necessarily in the Red Bull camp, but that they would make sure that he does get a seat. I cannot see anybody else there unless they start talking to Bartoletto or to Hajar. So the era is coming to an end. It's the inevitable thing in Formula One. Obviously, certain eras are going to come to an end. The Lewis Hamilton era is going to come to an end at some point. He's going to drive for Ferrari next year and possibly the year after. With a new dispensation in 2026. I don't know how long after that he's going to continue, but I mean, that would mean that he's been in Formula One for 21 seasons in 2027. And Fernando Alonso, I've just mentioned it, he's also coming towards the end of his career, obviously. It doesn't mean that he's not going to be competitive. It doesn't mean that he's going to stop racing. I mean, there are many other possibilities for Alonso. He's mentioned that already before. Even IndyCar. There's Dakar for him. There's World Endurance Championship sports cars. A lot of possibilities there. But the end of the Alonso era in Formula One, I think we are closer to that as well. Valtteri Bottas, who we mentioned. Yes, does he actually bring that much to Sauber as they do at the moment? Can he? Because I think that car is a dog. I would be very surprised if anybody can get anything positive out of that car. And so all of that is going to happen. But I think it's very, very exciting to see some of these youngsters coming through. Antonelli coming through next year at Mercedes. We've got Ollie Beerman, who's going to be full-time Formula One next year with Haas, who's also been very impressive. Beerman, by the way, is the only driver in Formula One history, as far as I can see, that has scored a point for two drivers that he made his debut, for two teams that he made his debut for in each case. So for two teams in one season, and he scored points on both occasions. I cannot remember. I don't think anybody else has done that. So Ollie Beerman is there also to watch as part of this new generation. And I think that generation is probably going to be spearheaded by Oscar Piastri if McLaren can continue to maintain their strong performances and even improve on that. So yeah, lots of things to look forward to.